Hey there, data detectives. Ever feel like you're just drowning in data, like you're trying to find the most valuable insights, but it's overwhelming?
Oh, absolutely. Happens all the time.
Well, today we're going to be tackling a classic problem that has its roots in the stock market A&D computer science.
Yeah, it's called the maximum Subarray
The
problem.
maximum Subarray problem. Okay, so what is that in like simple terms?
Well, think of it this way. Imagine you're looking at, let's say, a year's worth of stock prices for a particular company, right? And your goal is to figure out the period where you could have made the absolute most money.
So buy low, sell high kind of a thing.
Exactly. Buy low, sell high. That's the maximum Subarray problem in action. You're trying to find that sweet spot within the data.
That makes sense. But how do we actually start tackling this? Do we just like crunch numbers until we just stumble upon the answer?
Well, we could try that. It's actually called the brute force method.
Brute force method.
It's kind of like, imagine you have this massive keychain, right, with tons and tons of keys on it, and you're trying to unlock a door. The brute force method would be to try every single key on that keychain until you find the one that works.
Just trial and error.
Pretty much. And in this case, it means checking every single possible subray within a sequence of numbers to find the one that has the biggest sum.
So it would work, but it would take forever.
Huh.
Especially if you have a giant data set, right?
Exactly. You're absolutely right. It's incredibly inefficient, especially as the data gets larger and larger. And computer science, at its heart, is all about finding efficient solutions.
Right, right. There's got to be a smarter way to do this.
There is. And that's where dynamic programming comes in.
Dynamic programming. Okay, that sounds a little intimidating.
It might sound a bit complex, but the idea is actually pretty intuitive. Instead of repeatedly starting from scratch, like the brute force method, dynamic programming cleverly uses what we've already learned to speed things up.
Okay. So it's like we're learning as we go and using that knowledge to make better decisions.
Exactly. It's kind of like solving a jigsaw puzzle. You start by putting together small sections, right?
All right.
And then you use those completed sections as building blocks to solve the bigger picture. You don't start from scratch each time you pick up a new piece.
Okay, I see.
And that's what dynamic programming does. It stores and reuses previously calculated results, making the whole process much faster.
So instead of trying every key on the keychain, we're like looking for patterns and shortcuts.
You got it.
Okay, I'm starting to get this. So how does this dynamic approach actually work in practice when we're trying to find this maximum subarray?
Well, the key insight here is that the maximum sum ending at any given point in our data, it actually relies on the maximum sums we've already figured out for previous points.
So each step we take informs the next one.
Precisely. So we can store those previous results, those maximum sums, and use them to calculate the next one without having to redo all the work.
It's like a chain reaction.
Exactly. We're building a chain of knowledge, and each link makes the next one stronger.
That's a really cool way to think about it. So is this dynamic programming like the ultimate solution, or is there an even more elegant approach out there?
Well, hold on to your hats because things are about to get really interesting. We're going to talk about Kadane's algorithm.
Kadane's algorithm. Okay, that sounds almost mythical. What is this?
It's a classic, and for good reason. Kadane's algorithm is famous for being incredibly simple yet incredibly powerful. It takes the dynamic programming concept, right? And then it pushes it a step further. It recognizes that if we come across a subray that has a negative sum, we can basically ignore it.
Ignore it completely.
Yep, because it will never help us reach a bigger maximum sum.
Oh, that's clever.
Right. So it's like we're pruning away all the dead branches as we go. We're just focusing on the paths that have the potential to lead us to that biggest payoff.
So we're being selective, strategic. We're not wasting time on things that won't help us.
Exactly. And because of that, this amazing algorithm, it only needs to make one pass through the data.
One pass. That's way better than trying every key on the keychain.
Right. It's incredibly efficient.
Okay, you've got to show me this in action. So let's go back to that example sequence from our sources. It was -2, 1, -3, 4, -1, 2, 1, -5, 4. How would Kadane's algorithm solve that?
All right, picture this. We start at the beginning with -2, right?
Yeah.
So our maximum sum so far is -2.
Okay, so far good.
Then we move to the next number, which is 1. Now at this point, we have a decision to make. Should we add this one to our current subarray, or should we start fresh?
Okay, yeah, I see.
So if we add it, we get -2 plus 1, which is still -1.
Right.
But if we start a new subarray with just the 1, That's already bigger than -1. So in this case, we start fresh.
So we're always evaluating whether adding the current number is actually helpful or if it's better to just start a brand new subarray.
You got it. That's exactly what the algorithm does. So we have our subarray of 1. Now, the next number is -3. Again, we do the comparison. Starting a new subarray with -3 is better than adding it to the previous one.
Makes sense. Keep going, keep going.
All right, now we get to the exciting part. We hit 4. Adding 4 to our current subarray, which is just -3, gives us a positive sum, right? 1.
Oh, okay, so we've finally hit a positive sum.
We're on the right track. So we keep going. We add the next number, -1, to our sum, and it stays positive, so we keep it. Same with 2 and 1. Now our running subarray is 4, -1, 2, and 1.
And that adds up to 6.
Ooh.
So have we found our maximum subarray? Is that it?
Almost. We still have a couple more numbers to consider. The next one is -5. If we add that to our current sum, it would drag it down into the negative.
Right, back to negative.
And remember what Cadane taught us? A negative sum isn't helpful, so we discard the -5 and start fresh again.
Ah, okay, I see.
And finally, we reached the last number in our sequence, which is 4. And since 4 is greater than any other subarray we've seen so far, that becomes our new maximum subarray.
So our maximum subarray is 4, -1, 2, and 1, with a sum of 6.
Exactly.
We found the most profitable period in our pretend stock data, and we did it using this elegant, efficient, kind of magical Cadane's algorithm.
It is pretty magical, isn't it?
It is. It's a perfect example of how a well-designed algorithm can take something that seems really complex
Right.
and just simplify it, make it manageable.
Absolutely. But now imagine that instead of just a single line of numbers, what if we're dealing with a two-dimensional grid?
A grid, like a spreadsheet or something.
Exactly. Or even something like a satellite image.
Okay, yeah. So instead of just like one line of stock prices, we've got like a whole map of data points.
Precisely.
And we're trying to find the maximum subarray within that.
You got it.
So does Cadane's algorithm still work in that scenario? Or do we need something completely different?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting. It definitely gets more complex. Think about it like, instead of just a line of numbers, we're now dealing with a whole rectangle of values.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like trying to find the, I don't know, like the hottest spot on a heat map or something, right?
Exactly. That's a perfect example. Like a scientist trying to pinpoint the hottest region on a heat map. They're essentially trying to find that maximum subarray, but in 2 dimensions.
Okay, so instead of a line of like stock prices, we've got this whole grid, this rectangle of values. Does Cadane's algorithm, can we still use that? Or do we need like a whole new approach?
Well, the good news is we can actually adapt Cadane's algorithm to work in 2 dimensions.
Oh, okay, so we can still use his brilliance.
Exactly. But it requires a little bit of clever maneuvering. Imagine like slicing the 2D grid into a bunch of 1D arrays.
Slicing.
Yeah, like you're cutting it up into like, like bread slices. And each slice represents a combination of rows from the grid.
Okay, I see.
And then we treat each of those slices as a single line of numbers.
So it's like we're taking these cross sections of our data, right? Turning a 2D problem into a bunch of 1D problems that we already know how to solve.
That's a great way to put it. And then we just apply Cadane's algorithm to each of those 1D slices, find their maximum subarrays, and then we compare all those results.
And the biggest one wins. So we're basically leveraging Cadane's algorithm. We're just kind of transforming our data into a way that it can handle.
Exactly.
But wouldn't that create like a ton of slices?
Yeah.
Especially if you have like a really big grid. Wouldn't that take a really long time?
That's a great point. And you're right, as the grid size increases, the slicing technique can become pretty computationally expensive. The number of possible slices grows really quickly, and we have to run Cadane's algorithm on each one of them.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of work.
It is. And that's where we start exploring other strategies, things like approximation algorithms.
Approximation algorithms. Okay, so is that like we're sacrificing some accuracy for speed? Like we're getting a good enough answer, but not necessarily the absolute perfect answer?
You got it. It's all about trade-offs. In many real-world applications, a good enough solution that you can get quickly, that's way more valuable than spending tons of time and resources trying to find the absolute perfect solution.
Especially if you need to make a decision quickly.
Right.
Based on like real-time data. I'd rather have a pretty good answer now than have to wait like hours or days for the perfect answer.
Absolutely. And that's where approximation algorithms really shine. They allow us to get, close enough to the optimal solution, but in a much more reasonable time frame.
So what are some examples of these approximation algorithms? Like, how do they actually work for this maximum Subarray problem in higher dimensions?
One common approach is called divide and conquer. So the basic idea is you break down the problem into smaller subproblems, you solve those recursively, and then you combine those results to get the overall solution.
So it's kind of like that slicing technique we talked about before, right?
Right.
But instead of slicing the grid, we're kind of dividing the whole problem up into smaller chunks.
Exactly. And by carefully choosing how we divide the problem, we can actually control that balance between accuracy and speed. Like how much accuracy are we willing to sacrifice to get a faster answer?
It's like a balancing act.
It is. It's a delicate dance, between finding the best solution and finding it efficiently.
This is really making me think about like how these computational strategies can be applied to, problem solving in general, right?
Yeah.
Like breaking things down into manageable chunks, finding patterns, building upon existing knowledge. Those are valuable skills no matter what you're working on.
Absolutely. These are fundamental problem-solving strategies.
But I have to ask, like, are there any limitations to these approximation algorithms? Is there a point where they just, like, don't cut it anymore?
You're right to consider that. They're powerful, but they do have limitations. Generally speaking, the more accuracy you want, the more computational time you're going to need.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And as we venture into even higher dimensions, like 3 dimensions, 4 dimensions, even the most sophisticated approximation algorithms, they can start to hit their limits.
So what do we do then? Like, if even the best approximation algorithms can't keep up?
Well, that's where researchers are starting to look towards like the horizon,
Hmm.
to the world of parallel computing and even quantum computing.
Quantum computing. Okay, now we're talking like science fiction. Can you actually use something that futuristic to solve a problem like this, like finding the maximum subarray?
It might sound a little crazy, but yeah. Quantum computing has the potential to revolutionize how we solve these kinds of computationally intensive problems. Because quantum computers, they use the principles of quantum mechanics, right? Which allows them to explore many, many possibilities simultaneously.
So it's like instead of just one computer working on the problem, it's like having a million computers all working at the same time.
Exactly. And that can lead to these exponential speedups in computation.
So is this like a real thing, or is it still like mostly theoretical?
It's still early days for quantum computing, for sure. But the research is incredibly promising, and scientists are already investigating how to apply quantum algorithms to problems like the maximum Subarray problem. The early results are exciting.
It's like mind-blowing. So we could be on the verge of a computational revolution.
Potentially, it could impact countless fields.
But, with all this talk about faster, more powerful computing, I think we have to, also be thinking about the human element, right? Like, are we at risk of becoming too reliant on these machines to solve our problems?
That's a crucial point. While these tools are incredibly powerful, we need to remember they are just that, tools. We need to use them responsibly, ethically, always considering the potential consequences of their application.
Yeah, human judgment, critical thinking, those are more important than ever. We need to be the drivers of these powerful machines, not the passengers.
Exactly. We need to be in control.
But before we get too philosophical here, let's bring it back to this maximum Subarray problem, right? I mean, we've gone from brute force to dynamic programming to Cadane's algorithm, and now we're talking about quantum computers.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. It really shows how this problem that seems kind of simple on the surface can lead us down these amazing paths of discovery.
It really does. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, let's take a step back and just recap what we've learned so far.
Okay? Yeah.
We started with the brute force approach, which, remember, that's like trying every single key on that giant keychain, right?
Oh, yeah. I'm not going to forget that analogy.
Good. Then we explored dynamic programming, which is like solving that jigsaw puzzle strategically, building upon the sections we've already put together, and of course, the elegance of Cadane's algorithm, which is like finding that shortcut through the maze.
So many clever solutions.
And we discussed how this problem extends to higher dimensions, right? With all sorts of applications. Analyzing satellite imagery, understanding brain activity, it's everywhere.
And we even got a glimpse into the future, where quantum computers could just revolutionize how we solve these kinds of problems.
It's a really exciting time to be in this field.
It is. But our exploration isn't over yet. There's one more aspect of this maximum Subarray problem that we need to cover.
Oh, there is?
Yep. And that, my friends, is the world of online algorithms. So we talked about finding the maximum Subarray in like a static data set, right? But what if that data is constantly changing?
That's where things get really tricky. You're talking about the world of online algorithms.
Online algorithms. Okay, so is that like, I'm trying to think of a good analogy.
Think about it like you're trying to find the best route through a city, right?
Okay, yeah.
But the traffic patterns are changing all the time. You need to be able to adapt on the fly.
Oh, I see. So it's like instead of having all the information up front, you're getting it piece by piece, and you have to make decisions as you go.
Exactly. Online algorithms are designed to deal with data that arrives in a stream, continuously updating the solution as new information comes in.
Okay, that makes sense. So for our maximum Subarray problem, it's like instead of analyzing like a whole year's worth of stock prices all at once, we're getting like minute-by-minute updates, and we have to constantly be recalculating the maximum Subarray.
Precisely. It's like imagine you're tracking stock prices throughout the day, right? An online algorithm could be constantly updating the maximum subarray, showing you the most profitable period so far as the data changes.
So you can make decisions in real time.
Exactly. You're not waiting until the end of the day to see what happened. You're reacting to the market as it unfolds.
Wow. That's powerful. But wouldn't designing an online algorithm for this be like way more challenging than the other?
Algorithms, you don't have the luxury of seeing the whole picture, right?
Right.
You have to be able to adapt to new information, update the solution quickly and efficiently, and do all of that without sacrificing too much accuracy.
So it's like you're playing a strategy game, but you can only see like a small part of the board at any given time.
I like that. You have to make the best move based on the limited information you have, and always be anticipating what might happen next.
That's a good analogy.
So,
So is this like a solved problem? Or are people still working on this, these online algorithms for the maximum Subarray problem?
it's definitely an active area of research. Computer scientists are always looking for new and better ways to design these online algorithms to make them even faster, even more accurate, and able to handle even more complex scenarios.
It's fascinating, this problem, we started with something that seemed kind of simple, just finding the biggest sum in a list of numbers,
Yeah.
right? And it's led us to all these different areas of computer science, all these different algorithms and strategies.
It really highlights the beauty and the depth of this field, how even a seemingly straightforward question can lead us down these incredible paths of discovery.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that there's always more to learn, always new challenges to tackle.
Exactly. And who knows what amazing solutions people will come up with in the future, right?
I know. Maybe one of our listeners will be the next Cadane, the one who cracks the code and discovers a whole new algorithm for this problem.
I wouldn't be surprised.
So before we wrap up this deep dive, is there anything else, like any final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway from all of this is that even though these algorithms and techniques might seem, a little bit abstract, they actually have real-world applications everywhere.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether you're analyzing financial data or processing images or, even just trying to make the best decision in a complex situation, the principles behind the maximum Subarray problem, they can provide some really valuable insights.
It's all about breaking down complex problems, right?
Yep.
Recognizing patterns, making strategic decisions, and being adaptable to change. Those are skills that everyone can benefit from.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And as technology keeps advancing and the amount of data we deal with keeps growing, these skills are only going to become more and more important.
Well said. Well, this has been an incredible deep dive. We've gone from brute force to quantum computers and everything in between.
It's been a wild ride.
It has. Thanks for joining us on this journey, data detectives.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.